Brandon Tatum Show. The Brandon Tatum Show. KTAR News, 92.3 FM.
I hope you guys are out there driving safe with your seatbelts on. I'm an advocate for wearing your seatbelt. Personal reasons as well. You know, I had a family member get into a car accident and was ejected from the vehicle. Thank God that, you know, God saw it fit to save his life, and he's still living today. But a lot of people aren't lucky. So if you're listening to me, you better have your seatbelt on. But let's get into this law enforcement thing, man. I'm big on law enforcement. If I could talk every segment about law enforcement, I probably would. And most of y'all will probably listen to me, because if you ask Corinne, and y'all don't know Corinne, my beautiful girlfriend, if you ask Corinne, she loved my police stories. She listens to me all day talk about the gory ones, the fun ones, dirty ones, whatever you want to call it. When I say dirty, I mean legal, though. Not like that DPS officer that was groping people on traffic stops. No, that ain't me. But law enforcement, and I say the job as a police officer is probably one of the greatest honors to have in the country. I mean, I've never served in the military. I know that it's honorable. But I tell you what, being a police officer day to day, dealing with the public, wearing the badge, I mean, it is one of the greatest experiences that I've ever had. And unfortunately, people in this country, some people, not all, they find it necessary to jump on a bandwagon of talking dirty about police. I say dirty. I don't like to use that word dirty, but talking bad about police officers, or falling into the narrative that police officers are out here just murdering people at will and not being held accountable. I think that's the biggest crock of crap that I've ever heard. If there's anything bigger, let me know. But that's the biggest one that I know of. Police are out every day protecting and serving. Most of y'all, when you pull up to your house, you're eating dinner, or whatever, when you go to sleep tonight, police officers are out working tirelessly, even when they don't feel like it. You know, you get into it with your spouse or whatever. Some of y'all married, get into it with your spouse, get into it with your girlfriend, having a bad day. When you're a cop, it don't matter. You still have to show up. You still have to put on a face of care, concern, humility when you're dealing with the public. Another thing that has gotten to me about negative lies regarding police rhetoric is the idea that cops are out here just killing black folks. I hate when I hear people say that, and I hate to have to give this stat, even though it's true, but cops kill more white people than they do black people. Twice as many, if you look at the numbers. And you know what they say to me, Brandon, but there's more white people than there are black people, and that's the reason why they're doing it. And it's like, no, but cops only deal with the criminal element. They don't deal with every single person in the population. And if you look at the stats nationwide, I'm not talking about individual communities, I'm talking about nationwide. You look at stats nationwide, African-American people, unfortunately, commit a heck of a lot of crime per capita, and a heck of a lot of crime when you look at the totality of numbers. For instance, let's say African-American people make up 13% of the population, but the people who are committing the most crimes aren't elderly women, elderly men, young kids. It's normally men between the age of about 15, 16, and 35. Can we all agree to that? That's a fair statement across any racial lines. But since we're talking about the African-American community, that's a fair assessment. Let me be conservative. Let me push the number a little higher than what it probably is. Let's say that's about 7% of the population. About 7% of the population commits almost half of the murders in this country, over half of violent crimes in this country. So police are going to overwhelmingly be patrolling in these communities and have interactions with these individuals. With that being said, they shoot twice as many white people as they do black people. Another statistic that people may not recognize, you can look at any FBI statistic this year, is that you talk about unarmed shootings. Anyone that have a perception of shootings and use of force understand that just because you're unarmed don't mean that you're not a deadly threat. And it doesn't mean that officers can't use deadly force against you. If you disagree with me, then you might want to go do a little research. You might want to look at the Arizona revised statute. It'll let you know what officers can and can't do and what necessitates a deadly threat. But when you look at nationwide unarmed persons being shot by police, there have been twice as many white people shot unarmed than black people. If you listen to the media, you look at the television, you will be lulled into believing that black people are uniquely dealing with officers in a way in which some people believe that's unacceptable. Speaking of people getting shot unarmed, it's just not true. Look at this, for example. Let's look at the totality of police response. I'll give you an example of something that I know, not something I read in the book, but something I know for a fact. When I was in Arizona, as a police officer, in Tucson, we would take about 1,000 calls of service per day, 1,200 sometimes when it's hot. So average out to about 1,000 calls a day. We do it every day. We don't take a day off. 365 days in a year. That's 365,000 calls, right? If my math is correct. Now, we deal with, 4 or 5 people per call, depending on the circumstance, and you multiply 365,000 times 5. With millions of people that we deal with on an annual basis. Go and look and do research and say how many officer-involved shootings have happened. We would have probably 8 in 1 year. Out of millions of interactions with people, 8 officer-involved shootings. That's not a lot of shootings. Most people who are law enforcement officers never use their service pistol, rifle on duty. I was on a SWAT team. I was a police officer in the most dangerous areas of Tucson. People don't realize this. Tucson is the most dangerous city in the state per capita. I think the only one, with a city a certain size. Keep it that way because South Tucson is leading, but they're a square mile. So, most dangerous city. Pull my gun probably, 4 or 5 times a week. Never had to shoot anybody. I remember when Villasenor was the chief of police in Tucson, he was a police officer for 32 years or so. Retired, never shot anybody. So if people are having this idea that cops are continuously shooting people and murdering people for no reason, you might want to do a little more research. Am I out of time or am I okay? I just want to make sure I'm on. Y'all know I can talk. So in our next segment, we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about some interesting stuff. I really want to talk about Candace Owens, my sister. Make sure you tune in for the next segment. You're listening to the Brandon Tatum Show on KTAR 92.3.
This is the Brandon Tatum Show. The Brandon Tatum Show on KTAR News 92.3 FM and the KTAR News app.